Welcome back to Fleshing It Out with Samantha Spittle. This month we are tackling a shame trigger of aging. And no matter what age you are, when you enter a new season of life, there's often so much uncertainty. You know, whether you're a young mom and you're going from those baby toddler years to them being in school, or as Jill shares, you know, kind of entering that empty nester phase. And even if you don't have kids, seasons are changing all the time. And that can lead us to feeling stuck when we don't know the answers. What is the next step? And I love how Jill walks us through her process and how, you know, discovering art. She's a returning podcast guest, so she shared earlier in an episode how she got into art. This episode, we dive further into ways we can stay curious, things we can try, hobbies we can do to allow ourselves space for new things to enter. So sit back and enjoy as Jill and I flesh it out. Don't forget to check out our VIPs, our valuable, insightful partners. You can find them at www.samanthaspittle.com/VIPs. You'll find people that can help you with additional resources and services to keep fleshing it out beyond the podcast. It's funny because, you know, this last month was parenting. We talked about parenting.
Right.
And, you know, one of the overarching themes was to stay curious throughout your parenting journey. And of course, the parenting journey never ends because you become a parent of adults. You know, your children are now adults. And then there's this whole other phase of life where, you know, it's a new beginning, and kind of walking through that, a combination of the feelings, the experiences, and then things you can do to kind of, you know, enjoy this next chapter. And
right. And that it is the next chapter, and that's exactly what it is. And I know, just like with anything, if you don't know what the next chapter is and you're creating it, there's fear around it. And I think that's okay, but there's a lot of shame in, you know, since it's fleshing it out, there's shame in not knowing what your next steps are. And I think that's where me going back to beginning the year in February, it's not that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I felt like I needed some time because I feel like I'm shifting. Things are shifting and I'm allowing for that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, there is fear around not knowing exactly what the next step is.
Yeah.
And, but possibility at the same time. And I think that's where some people, you know, that's the cup half full, half empty sort of thing. You know, I think that there's tons of possibilities out there, and it's just a matter of, which direction do I want to take? Do I want chocolate or vanilla? You know, there's no
swirl.
wrong answers. or swirls. Yeah. I like that. Exactly. And I think for me personally, it's always been keeping the creative juices flowing that helps me solve these problems. And I think that's my biggest thrust for other people, is making sure they stay creative in whatever endeavors they do, so that they have the, you know, an open mind to be able to accept what's coming at them, because they might think they want to do one thing, but something totally different comes at them. And sometimes they resist it when they should be embracing it.
Oh, that's a beautiful intro to jumping into talking about this idea of aging and change and trying new things. So why don't you introduce yourself, a returning guest, Jill Perla?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Samantha. I really appreciate it. So I have been painting professionally for, about 12 years now. Quick story, started out painting after I had been working in business for 25 years in DC, you know, doing the hustle bustle. I started painting because my dad, he started doing art years ago when he was doing art therapy at his day away camp, and he had Alzheimer's. So in an effort to help him feel at peace and calm, he painted and he drew in his day away camps. And when I saw him do that, I thought, he and I are cut from the same cloth. We're so similar. I'm going to pick up that paintbrush and give it a whirl, because he was actually pretty good. fast forward to today, I've been painting and selling artwork as a full-time career ever since, which is kind of crazy, but it's crazy good, and it's been my passion for all these years, and it still is. Creating art is a driving force in my everyday. If I could just paint every single day, I'd wake up, happy. But as you know, how life goes, sometimes you have to actually get groceries and, do the mundane things in life.
Yes.
That happens.
The things. Well, it's exciting to have you back because we, as I said, a returning guest in the first episode. So go back and listen. We talked more about your journey and kind of how you got into all that. And when you and I spoke earlier about kind of this season 3 and the shame triggers, we talked about aging and how the seasons of our life, the chapters change. And, last month we talked about parenting and staying curious when you're parenting. And as you and I were talking, it was like, we have to stay curious throughout our whole life because it's so easy to get into these lanes or boxes or something. And, as you being an almost empty nester, having adult children, suddenly it's your life completely shifts, and that can be scary. And I'm not there yet, but I know from having friends that have started to make the transition, there's a lot of emotions that go into that. So I'd love to kind of dive in and hear from your perspective, because I know having that creative outlet has been not only helpful for if you're into creativity, but like the lessons you learned along the way were really helpful. So,
absolutely. Honestly, some people, when they're dealing with being an empty nester, I know a lot of people, they might move, they might downsize, they might do that, and move to Florida, for example, or just uproot and do that sort of thing. And I'm not quite there yet, but I think that it's good to kind of sit back and analyze and see kind of where you're at and where you want to go, and think of your life almost, I always kind of structure it kind of as a little business in a way. I look at my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan, kind of where would I really love to be in 10 years? And to realize that, it's funny because when I was younger, I would look at somebody who's my age at 55 and think, oh my gosh, they're old as hell. What, they're so old, they may as well just stop. And, and it's funny because now that I'm older, I'm like, wait, this is young. This is young.
Yes.
I'm not old. I've got plenty of life in me.
Yes.
But, a lot of people are retiring, and, that is just not anything that is really of interest to me. I know. And, back to parenting, everything from business to parenting, everything starts shifting. And especially in parenting, you start looking at your kids as adults. And that is so different because they're making decisions on their own and they're making their life decisions. And you just kind of have to take a little bit of a back seat and watch and be there when they're ready to say, hey, I need help, or I love advice. But it is really a fine line of being too up in their business, as it were, right? Because then they start shutting down. And, I always want that really open dialogue with my kids.
Yeah, the healthy detachment. That's what podcast guest and VIP Dawn Gashir talks a lot about. And I love that idea of the healthy detachment because, as moms and stuff, we want to be so attached. But of course, as we get older, they get older and those dynamics change. And I think we talked about it before we were recording, but talked about as our kids get older and we start getting to this new stage of life, it can be exciting, it can be scary. And I would love to hear how you're starting to navigate that and how the choices you've made. We talked on the first episode about getting into art, and that was something, that was kind of like that was definitely a second career for you. And
absolutely.
I think so much I'm sure you learned so that maybe this next season is more hopeful, curious.
Oh, absolutely. I think I learn a lot about myself through painting and through the canvas. A lot of people will write, and for me, it's painting. And that's where in the group that I have, it's Creative Kickstart, where I have people that are similar in age, maybe 40s, 50s, 60s. And I teach them how to paint. And I'm really not teaching them necessarily how to paint, but how to let go and how to create and really experience what I experienced through painting. And what I did, 12, 13 years ago now, giving up the standard of working at a 9-to-5 job, opening up my own business and creating my own life was pivotal. And it was really helpful for my kids to see me do that, because it allowed them to see that their life doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It doesn't have to be this way. If they don't want to go to college, of course, I'm encouraging them to go to college because I think that's a good foundation. But if they've got another plan that's better for them, I'm all ears. And I think that's where learning through talking to the kids and really engaging with them, but also having my own outlet has been huge. Because if, as a parent, I don't care what part of the process you're in, whether it's, still raising little kids and they're running around, you have got to keep your eye on who you are, as a parent, as an individual. Forget the parent part, as an individual, because at the end of the day, when they're grown up and you've done your job as a parent, which you'll never not be a parent, you'll always worry about them, but the role shifts and changes a little bit. And you do have that healthy detachment, like you're saying. And you have to be able to have something for yourself to lean into and do and be proud of, because your life isn't your child's life. It is your life and you're creating it. And I think society over time has caused women in particular to not allow themselves or afford themselves the ability to have something that's only theirs. Because I think people think that that's, oh, don't be selfish. Don't think about yourself. You've got to think about the kids. And I'm not talking about, going out and spending boatloads of money and being lavish and being silly about things. I'm talking about take 10 minutes out of the day. If that's all you can do, and really reconnect with yourself. And for me, it was painting. It could be writing. It could be taking a walk, anything. But if you don't reconnect, you're going to have nothing left in you. And when the kids are all grown up, you're kind of like, ooh, now what? Right?
I think that's so common. And it's so funny. You were talking about the hobbies. I could have easily sat here a year ago and I would have said, women need something for themselves. And I have some stuff for myself, so I'm not in that boat, then you take a step back of life and look and think. And I remember talking to my husband. So with the podcast, it started as I called it like a passion project. And it was kind of, I thought, okay, that's my way of protecting myself in case it's a flop, from a business perspective.
Yes.
And then, feeling this pressure. And I've said, for a while now, because the podcast, I feel like pretty much saved my marriage, my health, my family, everything. It's been so good to us personally. So if nothing else comes of it, it's worth it. So that all being said, it's like my words are all there, but now cut to my husband. We were talking about buying something and basically spending money for the podcast. And, we were able, thankfully we had our sponsor the first 2 seasons and able to kind of pay for this hobby is kind of the way I always looked at it. Well, then it becomes, wait, if it's a business, if you're putting money into it, what do we need? And I just was having such a hard time spending money, like anything extra than like bare bones. And he said, well, there's nothing wrong with spending money on it. Like if you enjoy it, if I enjoy it, if we enjoy it, it doesn't matter if it's like moneymaker or not. And I thought, oh my gosh, because back in when I worked with women, doing Mary Kay and everything, I had a similar conversation about women kind of losing themselves. And I thought, well, that's definitely not me, because I found myself before I had kids.
Right.
And now my husband wants to buy a camera for the computer. And I'm like, oh, we don't need to spend any money. And he said, well, even if it's just a hobby, there's nothing wrong with having a hobby. What if you just
Exactly.
wanted to go do something for fun? And I thought, oh my gosh,
Right. Right.
that
Right.
is
And
so hard.
it's so nice that your husband's feeling that way too,
Yeah,
because I know it's unfortunate because a lot of husbands are like a little bit more rigid and sometimes the
oh,
wives are a little bit
for
more
sure.
rigid.
Yeah.
And but it's funny because I think a lot of times people are, I know there are a lot of husbands out there that play golf all the time.
Hmm.
They don't mind buying a 9 iron or whatever and spending however much on it, and they
Yeah.
don't think twice about it. But I think again, it's a money mom
Yeah.
wife thing.
It's
It
hard.
just is that. Oh gosh, I don't know. Should I? Well, you know what? You do only live once. And right.
Yeah.
And if it provides you joy, that's the deal. And hobbies, it's funny. I know growing up, I used to think of the word hobby is so trivial and kind
Yeah.
of silly because, I was working, I was like, making money doing this. And like
Yeah.
hobbies, whatever. That's stupid. Hobbies are dumb.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, wait a second, people. Hobbies are a
Hmm.
lifeline. They are a lifeline, and it comes in such a different thing. Somebody might want to paint furniture as a hobby. Some people might want to take computers apart as a hobby. A hobby is not just scrapbooking. A hobby is whatever you like to do, whittling. I don't care, anything, redecorating.
Yeah.
But I think the key is to get something that charges you up, that gets you moving, whether it makes you money or not. I totally agree with that. But again, it's easy to give advice, but when you're in it, you're like, "Ooh, I really want to buy that, drafting table. Should I?" And you
Yeah.
have this really weird thing, but you won't worry about spending thousands of dollars on a new car.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how society
When it's a
places.
necessity versus, the needs and wants. And it's so funny. I kind of
Mhm.
joke for years about how I have no hobbies. I mean, ever since I was a kid, and who knows what, all that's tied to with, I always joked talking to people was my hobby, and which is why I started a podcast. And so like,
Exactly.
it's so funny how all this roundabout, like, oh wait, I joked that this was my hobby, but wait, what if it really is just my hobby? Is that enough? Is
Exactly.
that okay? Is it okay if I spend my time doing something that's not productive, or that feels productive in the sense of making money or
Right.
doing this? But it is
Right.
productive because if it's making me happy, my family happy, us healthier and happier, then so be it.
Well, and see, that's the thing because, and back to aging, it's the same thing. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. That doesn't change. If you have a hobby now or when you're older, it's always going to serve you. And
Hmm.
and I really think it's funny because years and years ago, I was the one of 5 kids in the family. And I was the one kid that my mom decided I was going to try everything: guitar lessons, piano lessons, dance lessons, you name it, because she felt like I needed something because I was extraordinarily shy. And I'm curious by nature. So I dove into all those different things. And I think you've got to keep that curiosity going your entire life. Because if you don't, then you just kind of shrivel up and it just becomes um, a life of kind of stale and flat. if
Yeah.
you if you have curiosity, you're constantly and it could be curious about learning about world history or art history or stuff that I might be like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that, right? But other people might think, hey, I'm going in, I'm going to try it, and if that
Yeah.
charges you up, go for it. And
Yeah.
just never it's the old adage of never stop learning, but
Yeah.
there's something to be said for that. I think when you stay curious, conversations are better, life's better. It's funny, I tend to be, and this will circle back, I tend to have like acquaintances, lots and lots of acquaintances, lots of friends,
Yeah.
but I have a best friend. I've always had like one best friend. There's always been, they kind of come and go, they're seasonal. But the best friend that's my best friend now, that's been around for about 10 years now, she and I have these conversations that we will go on these wild tangents and, about the world or news. And I think when we talk, we get so passionate about what we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about. And it leapfrogs from sometimes the kids, but sometimes politics. So, it's all over the place. And I think there's no judgment. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the older you are, I hope people become a little bit more settled in who they are. I know I am. I'm much more settled in who I am. And I think when you are, you're much more accepting of other people and
Mm-hmm.
who they are and what they stand for. And just if they don't stand for the same things you do, I'm very curious about,
Mm-hmm.
well, tell me about it. I want to know why you think that. And I
Yeah.
think if people could be a little bit more curious in life, people get along a lot better. I really
Yeah.
think. I really
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I've always said that, with any differences, that many times we all have the same end goal in mind. It's like with
Mm-hmm.
parenting, kind of a, you know, relevant topic to last month is, everyone, hopefully, barring any extremes, want to raise emotionally healthy, happy kids. We all go about it in kind of different ways. And so getting back, with this aging thing, like I said, it's this common thread I'm seeing of this staying curious. And so for your experience, if someone is, realizing that there is still a lot of life to live, that's the other, I feel like, common theme too with aging, right? Because the older you get, you're like, wait, this isn't that old. Not when I was young, I thought it was old. And so
Right.
kind of looking
Yep.
forward with excitement and passion, how can people start kind of
Mm-hmm.
jumping
Mm-hmm.
into trying new things, or gaining even the confidence to do those things that feel out of the box, or, kind of, it's like a dream in your heart, if you have something
Mm-hmm.
like deep down that you've been wanting to do or try, but maybe there's like fear standing in the way, what are some things you found to kind of help push through that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with anything, even what you did when you taught your kids, it's baby steps. It's
Yeah.
one step in front of the other. And I think a lot of times people, when they get older, they look at young people and they think, oh, I can't do it because of technology, or there's always some sort of an excuse. And I would say, let those go because they're just holding you back. And if there is a roadblock, find somebody who's younger or older or whatever and
Yeah.
ask them about it, get curious about it. And I think that the more I don't want to say push forward, but try and open your eyes, and again, have grace for yourself. Um, the world will open up. If like, for example, when I'm teaching my art classes, so many people look at a blank canvas and they are like, they lock up because they're like, I don't know what to do with this blank canvas. I'm afraid of making mistakes. Just it's very similar in life. It's
Yeah.
like, the only way you're going to know if something's going to work is to try. And if you're never really going to fail until you stop trying. So if you keep trying, you haven't failed yet because you're still trying. And that is always a mantra of mine. I'm like, well, I haven't failed yet because I'm still trying.
Yes.
You have to. And again, back to the beauty of getting older is you get more rooted in who you are and much more confident and solid. And I'm at the point where I want to share what I've learned, and I want everybody to hear how I figured it out, because I'm like, come on, listen, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to fix this, and we're going to do this together. And I want you to feel confident yourself. And it's almost like when my kids get, they're growing up and they might not be interested in my advice. So I'm like, well,
I'll find people who
somebody
are.
else might be.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
right.
I've got all this to give. And then it's here for them if or when they want it.
Exactly. And I think it's kind of cool now because I do feel like, everybody says that, I don't know what that is, the 50 is the new 40 and all
Yeah.
those. No, really, I honestly am the type of person that it's a number. It really doesn't matter. I personally get along with people who aren't my age.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much better with either a lot younger or a lot older. I don't know what it is about that, but I think it's just, again, I think because you're in a different life zone than this person, and that's where my curiosity comes in. And I think it's much more engaging conversation, because I don't tend to like to dwell on things. I like to just kind of move forward. And I think people who are curious, they want to learn more, and they're just like maybe voracious readers and just want to just grab onto life and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. I'm very similar in that. And I think it's that curiosity. I never thought of that before, but it's the curiosity and kind of being at a different stage and kind of being able to dive in there. And so the regaining your confidence, taking those baby steps as we're getting older, something we had talked about offline was engaging your brain more. And so what are ways to kind of engage our brains as we're getting older?
Well, so for me personally, it's doing anything that I haven't tried before. And I mean, obviously, I would recommend art every day, all day, because most people who've worked 9 to 5 aren't going to be doodling, drawing, painting. And anytime you can use the opposite side of the brain that you generally wouldn't is always good. And I know there is neuroscience behind that it's expanding your brain. And I think that's the biggest deal when you're older. I feel like sometimes your brain starts to kind of atrophy a little bit because you're just used to doing the same thing over and over. It's just habit.
Yeah.
If you can break any of the habits that you have and do things differently, I'm talking even silly things like brush your teeth with the opposite hand. I mean, anything you can do. And I think things that you can do to help you become more creative, or take a class, get certified in something, go to your local community college. You're going to meet new people, you're going to learn something new, and you're going to instantly feel younger. And not that the point is to feel younger, but feel more engaged. And I think that's a big key too. I think when your kids are older and they're leaving, you want to make sure you're not left in like this vacuum of silence. And with the group that I've created, it is a community where we gather, and even though we're painting, we're all gelling and we're all together and we're all creating together. And just, it's that kind of little bit of blissful time where it's like we're all trying to create the same thing. We're all kind of marching to the same beat. And it's very community driven. And it's almost like if you're part of a church, when you're all sitting there in the congregation and you're listening, there's that sort of spirit that just fills you, and it's so powerful to have a whole group of people together feeling the same thing at the same time. If you're at a wedding or, all of it, just if you can tap into that sense of community and feeling like you're part of something, and I hate to be silly, but bigger than yourself. And it's true.
It's so true.
I think now's when you should be volunteering at different organizations, and whatever you've done over the years, now's the time to volunteer and give time back and give back of yourself. And if you make money, great. If you don't, it doesn't matter. It's really, this is the real give back time, I think. Yeah. And it gives, as much as you give out, it comes right back to you.
Yeah. And the community aspect too. I think that's so huge, is finding the community, and also too, not to be afraid to find new communities. We talk a lot about breaking out of maybe some of the boxes we've put ourselves in or have been put in, fear of change. And maybe there's like a new community, to be a part of. Maybe there's something new you try with these, kind of using kind of hobbies or volunteer opportunities to try something different and not being afraid. Because as you said, you get older and you're like, wait, I'm just feeling much more secure in who I am, or more curious in who I am. And so not afraid to maybe take some of those chances. So.
Right. Take chances and not feel silly doing it. And, I think for me, there's so much technology that kind of trips me up nowadays, but there's so many people that are out there willing to help you, and they're like happy to do it.
Yeah.
And when you know somebody who can do something easily, you may as well ask them for help. And asking for help is not a problem.
Yeah.
You're told to ask for help when you're in school growing up. And I think, as you're an adult, you still don't know everything. No
Yeah.
one's ever going to know everything. And just knowing nobody knows everything. So who cares? Ask the
Ask.
question. Who
Why not?
cares? Just
Just
right.
ask.
And then the fear just goes away. It's funny because I used to dance. I used to be a ballet dancer all through college. And that is something I gave up long ago. But lately I've been wanting to take up dance classes again.
Mm.
So that might be my new thing that I try. So
Ooh.
something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of exciting.
Oh, I like that. A little nudge coming through
Exactly.
to try
Yep.
jumping into that. I think that's too one
Yep.
thing I've learned a lot from speaking to so many wise people is kind of, listening to our intuition that there's something, if you
Mhm.
feel curious to try something, that might
Yep.
be something worth pursuing and not feeling like it's ever too late, not feeling like we've missed the boat
Right.
on that one. So
Right. And it doesn't have to be new either. I mean, I used to sing in chorus and choir for years, and part of me is thinking, go back to that. So this
yeah.
is the time when you can pick up where you left off,
Yeah.
with a different angle. So lots and
Yeah.
lots of possibilities.
Well, even though we're wrapping up, I thought of something and I thought, okay, so I've had these great conversations around aging, and I've met so many women in my life, and there's so many stories of changing midlife, and kind of going in a new direction. And a lot of times it's sparked by some big life changes. And,
Hmm.
I'm thinking of, when you have, whether it's, a loss or a divorce or separation or something, that feels like a obvious life moment to pivot and
Hmm.
change. And I
Hmm.
know that we've talked before about, what does it look like to start over? But when your life
Hmm.
is still looks the same, you're still married, your kids are still at home, do we have to wait for a big life moment to start over?
No. No. It's funny because I think a lot of times people use something, say a move or, the kids leaving as, okay, I'm going to wait
Mm-hmm.
when that happens. So then you're wasting, say, 3 years, and that's not, sometimes it's good to wait. Sometimes it's actually better to jump in and make those changes now because you're in secure footing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do make big changes when, say, they've divorced or, gone through these major things or,
Yeah.
um, but for example, my husband, he has cancer and he has had cancer for years now, but it's one of those slow growing cancers. So that's part of the aging process to an extent as well. So
Yeah.
there's that feeling of, I want to live my life. He's living his life, but we're living life at different speeds in a way because, we're at different places,
Yeah.
and I think when you're married for so long and you're with somebody who has challenges like this, I think you have to continue to think about what makes you happy and not feel guilty about that. And
Mm-hmm.
just like, even if your husband's feeling well or you're feeling well and the health is still there,
Yeah.
you don't wait because life is so finite. I mean, we can talk about how, we're midlife, but
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I can tell people is, what's the point of waiting?
Mm-hmm.
There is no point of waiting. And if it is fear, that you might make a fool of yourself, then you really don't have a reason to wait. I
Yeah.
mean, there could be mitigating circumstances, maybe too much money, or,
Yeah.
maybe you are the caretaker and you can't
Mm-hmm.
move forward, but you can take little baby steps
Yeah.
back to that. You might not be able to launch into this huge new career, but you can sure take out that paintbrush and try,
Yeah.
one canvas, right? And, you could want to meet yourself where you're at, just like
Yeah.
we would want to meet a friend where they're at,
Yeah.
so that's what I would say. Meet people where they're at and yourself where
Yeah.
you're at, and just have grace.
That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. Cause I know that being at a stage of life, caretaking, I know my mom,
Mhm.
with her mom, it's so a different circumstance, but it was long distance, and it just took a lot out of her to do a lot of that responsibility and care. And so it's something we kind of talked about, because not wanting me to feel like I had to put my life on hold, when they're kind of at that stage of life. And, if it's your spouse or anyone in your life, people who are responsible for their adult children still.
Right.
And so finding ways, I appreciate the reminder that it might look different, like you said, you might not be able to go, full charge ahead, but just no matter what the stage is, finding something for ourselves, because when, life is constantly changing, and we don't want to lose everything, that makes us.
You don't, and even though I'm a parent of much older kids, even if you're a parent of much younger kids, you really can't feel guilty for fulfilling yourself, because you're going to be a much better parent. You're going to be a much better human being. Yeah. It's back to filling your bucket and filling other buckets. You really have to do it and not feel guilty about it, because there's a balance.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, being around people who just are constantly talking about the growth and curiosity, it's something that I think almost, I guess, would say maybe that's the secret to aging. Maybe it's curious.
I think so. I mean, I personally think I'm 12, and I've said that before, and I will always say that. I happen to take a look, and I'm like, oh, wait, you're not 12. That's fine. That's fine. I still am 12 in my head. Yeah. And I just think if you're young at heart and there is really something to it, you will live a far longer, happier life. Really. Yeah. Really.
And enjoy it and finding the joy. And it's funny, because on another one of the conversations with when my guest Danielle, we talked about doing the work of growth and healing, and trauma work and therapy, and how it's important work and we have to do it, but we don't want to lose the joy. And we talked about kind of digging deeper into finding our happiness and when were we last happy. And so this is a great pairing with that, because it kind of helps us take that next step of like, what are the things that make you happy? And also that's the other thing where with this idea of aging is you might kind of identify things that make you happy, but then that's where fear and doubt could step in to say, can't do it.
Right. And don't fool yourself.
Yeah.
Don't fool yourself, because you've been around the block long enough that you can tell whether it's fear, and it's genuine fear. Like, maybe you shouldn't jump off that cliff.
Yes.
Maybe you should try this instead. But, I tell you, if you live life with zeal, you're going to have a lot better life and a much more full and rich life.
Yes. Well, Jill, thank you so much. I always love getting to chat with you, and I appreciate your perspective, and I love getting to check in and see how things are changing and evolving, and, seeing you take this passion, with painting that was yours and became professional, and now moving into how you can help others rediscover that creativity and passion in life and whatnot. So
it's been a joy as usual, and a pleasure. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. And how can people get in touch with you, Jill?
They can get in touch with me at my website, which is Jill Perla Art. And if they would like to have a free class, they can join Creative Kickstart for a 30-day free trial of my creativity group. And that's where they can paint and have fun and explore painting, which might be their next new hobby.
Might be. And even if it's not, it is a step forward. And so I have learned that there are no wrong steps. And so you take the step, and then if it feels right, you stay there. But either way, it'll get those creative juices flowing.
Yep. You never know. It could be jewelry making. So that's the beauty of it. Just open those eyes and ears and give it a whirl.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, where we explore growth and healing through vulnerable conversation. Our hope is that you feel seen and find tools for growing resiliency and tackling your own growth and healing. Be sure to subscribe and check out the VIPs and other resources at samanthaspittle.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.